right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Jacob Albrock, Paul Savage with you on this Friday, going through the NFL draft. We'll end the conversation today, Paul, with the running backs. We'll get to the Max Abmas news before the end of the show as well. Paul, running backs are an interesting conversation. We don't ever see them go early anymore. But we saw Bijan Robinson go very early yesterday, inside the top 10. The Falcons take him at 8. Look, I think this is such a silly argument. Is it an argument? Here's the thing, Paul. Great football players are great football players. The narrative that it is absolutely sacrilegious to take a running back early in today's NFL makes absolutely no sense to me. Do you have to have a great running back to win in the league? Absolutely not. Can you get one later in the draft? Yes, you can. But don't try to tell me that running backs in this league are not still game-changing players. Has Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, have those been game-changing players? Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones. That position still matters, and it especially matters now when you can find guys who can line up all over the field. Bijan Robinson's not a running back, Paul. He's a great football player. Bijan Robinson can line up in the slot if they need him to. He's the kind of, don't you think there's value? Look at Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's, why did he become such a valuable football player, Paul? Because they use him at running back. What was part of the reason Tyreek Hill was so successful in Kansas City? Because they utilized him as a running back sometimes. It blows my mind that everyone's going to look at Bijan Robinson and the Falcons back. They're crazy. They shouldn't have taken running back that high. What if his position was athlete or wide receiver? Would everyone the literal exact same player, right? What if instead of RB in front of Bijan Robinson's name, you had WR or weapon or whatever you want to define Deebo Samuel as? Would anybody be sitting here today saying that was a crazy pick?
Well, no, of course not. But one of the things about Bijan Robinson is, let's remember, he's had 4,300 yards rushing in 31 games. I know those are the stats. I don't have them in front of me, but that's what my memory serves. That's a lot. That's good. And we're talking about quality opposition, Big 12 quality opposition, to have that many yards in that few of games. That's something that you don't see anymore in today's football. It's different. Offenses are different. And you have a guy like that, 215 pounds, he's going to be somewhat durable, or they're going to assume he's going to be somewhat durable. I really don't blame the taking of Bijan Robinson. I think the Falcons probably are a good spot for him to go. But he is a guy that is being perceived as being that one special guy. Now, if you want to talk about a pick that's a little surprising, Jahmyr Gibbs surprises me a little bit. Now, that surprises me to the point because there's still questions about who he is, his size, how he fits in to an NFL offense. And I think there are some situations. I mean, he's 5'9", 199 pounds. He's going to have to increase his skills in certain areas of the running back trade, pass rush or pass defense, pass protection. I mean, there's things he's going to have to do to get better. I think that Jahmyr Gibbs, at his point of being picked 12th by the Lions, is surprising. Not so much for Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to fault the Falcons for taking Bijan Robinson at all. I like that pick because he could be a game changer. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I don't look. Jahmyr Gibbs might be fine. I didn't mind it that it was Jahmyr Gibbs. I minded it that the Lions just invested in David Montgomery and they already had DeAndre Swift. That's what doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's not that I got nothing against Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's sort of a utility knife type guy too. But and maybe they just line him up in the slot.
Not at 12.
Right. I think that it's not as much that for this. I don't mind the Lions. I only mind it because they have other backs. They have other now. If they use Jahmyr Gibbs in a way where he's out there all the time, then I don't have a problem with it. So that's the thing for me with this narrative that you don't need to take these guys early. I just think that that's nonsense. Great players need to be taken early. It's up then to the coaching staff to utilize those great players
Figure out
in
who's
whatever
great.
way they need to be utilized. If Bijan Robinson is a top 10 talent in this draft, now I didn't see him that way. So it's interesting for me to have this discussion because I didn't see Bijan Robinson that way, but almost everybody else did. And if he is that, then taking him makes all the sense in the world because you can put him anywhere. Who cares what his position is? The NFL doesn't really play that way anymore. There are still feature backs like that have value in this league. Of course there are. It still matters to be able to run the ball. But when you have a great player who can catch the ball like a wide receiver, great. If he's the most talented guy and you need talented guys on offense, take the player. I have no problem with the Falcons if they see him as that kind of talent. And again, almost everybody does. Then I got no problem with it. Go take him because you're just going to use him as long as he's out there on every snap. Who cares? People continue to look at this like you're taking a running back who's only going to run the ball on first and second down. Well, yeah, if you've got a running back that's only going to run the ball on first and second down that you're using high picks on, that doesn't make sense, right?
Right, I got
But
you.
if you've got a running back that you're going to put all over the place, that's out there for all three downs, that you're using like Christian McCaffrey, if we took age out of the equation, Paul, if age, like for my next question, don't consider age, don't consider anything but strictly their ability and what they can do on a football field. And we could go in and you take quarterbacks off the board, right? Where do you think Christian McCaffrey would rank where teams would want to take him?
Oh, that's an interesting question. That's a good question. I would imagine, oh my gosh.
He'd be way up there.
Top 15 maybe? Top 15
Yeah,
of
sure.
Maybe better, but at least top 15?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, like, you look at that, and everyone loves to go take wide receivers early. Okay. There was a time not that long ago where great high-paid, like, when was the last time a high-paid wide receiver won a Super Bowl? Like, where you see, like, the highest-paid guys. It doesn't, like, go look at the trends of the teams. Now, that's changing.
Well,
Don't
the
get
Rams
me wrong.
had
That's
one
changing in the
pretty good.
league
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
No.
in Cooper Kupp, right.
Cooper Kupp was one of those guys.
Yeah, so, it's changing to some degree now, but for a long time, it was like, well, high-paid receivers, they're not worth it, right? It's not worth it to draft receivers early and all this. The exact same thing that exists for running backs now existed for wide receivers just before it existed for running backs. We said the same thing about wide receivers when the Patriots were winning all their Super Bowls.
Right.
And so, you just have to, like, stop with the narratives for a minute. Like, trends matter in the NFL, yes, but great players are great players are great players are great players. Mm-hmm. And if Bijan Robinson is a great player, then the Falcons taking him makes absolute and total sense. The only reason you're seeing that being graded poorly is because of the two letters in front of his name that are RB, right?
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
So if we called him something else, like if Bijan Robinson, for whatever reason, came into this draft and we had something called a weapon, right? Offensive weapon or flex player or whatever you want to call it. Where do you think people would be salivating over adding Bijan Robinson to the offense? Oh, this guy can line up everywhere. He runs great routes. Like all the things that he does, if they didn't just call him a running back, everyone would love the pick. So you either like the player or you don't like the player. Don't poop on the pick. Because of the two letters in front of his name, he's either a good player or he's not a good player.
Well,
they'll figure out a way to use him.
That's a good point. And needs of your team will obviously dictate whether you take a running back, a guy with an RB in front of his name. it depends on the needs of your team. It depends on your coordinator. It depends on game plans. It depends. There's a lot of things that depend on where you take him or who you take at whatever pick it might be. So I'm with you on that. I understand that. And that's for now. That's for this draft, and this may be for the way people.
And then it becomes a question, Paul, of whether you evaluate Bijan Robinson that highly. I mean, that's what really, and then you can get into that. So there are rumors now that the Lions are trying to trade DeAndre Swift, which makes the Jahmyr Gibbs pick make a little bit more sense because, David, you do want two guys there. You don't want three, but having two makes sense. So if you took Gibbs and now you can get something for Swift, okay, that makes a little bit more sense. By the way, if DeAndre Swift's available and the Lions need to offload him and you can get him cheap, I understand his injury risk. I'd be interested in DeAndre Swift.
Yeah,
he is a dynamic talent.
By the way, is there an offensive line other than Alabama that you would rather be a running back and play behind? I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs is one of those players who also had the advantage of, my goodness, let's face it, almost an NFL quality offensive line. Now, I'm not throwing shade on that. I'm just saying he had the advantage of playing behind a pretty good offensive line, didn't he? So.
But they get the most talented players for that reason too. Talent is talent.
Part of the reason.
It's fine if they get something for Swift that makes more sense.
But I like your take though. This was the most unusual. I guess maybe I say surprising pick of the entire first round was Gibbs going to number 12 to the Lions. The pick, the place in the draft picked me. The player surprised me, and the team that took him, all three of those things surprised me to a certain extent. I was a little surprised. Most unusual, I'm not going to say the worst pick because how do we know? I'm just going to say the most unusual and, basically, head-scratching pick was at number 12 by the Lions.
Yeah, it is. And so here's the list of first-round running backs, and you understand why there's hesitation. Najee Harris in 2021. I don't think that's working out. Travis Etienne, the book is out. He was pretty good last year. We'll see. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even though it's counted as a first-round pick, which, okay, technically, no, that didn't work out. Josh Jacobs, he's been okay. Saquon Barkley, when he's on the field, you can see the appeal there. Rashad Penny's hurt every year. Sony Michel, meh. Leonard Fournette, meh. Christian McCaffrey, obviously worth it. Zeke Elliott, obviously worth it. I think the Rams would tell you Todd Gurley was worth it. And then you get back into like Trent Richardson's and Doug Martin, and now you're going way back, more than 10 years. But I get people's hesitation. But my point is that position is changing so much, right? That we cannot think of guys in the same way that we think of, bruiser running backs. Those guys still exist, and those guys are still valuable. That's not what it is. But to have players that can line up all over the field and just get the ball in their hands, the NFL's never been more prone for that to work.
Mm-hmm. Well, would you mind if I lead us into another question with regards to running backs, and that's Deuce Vaughn at K-State? What do you think the chances of somehow, some way, the Kansas City Chiefs getting Deuce Vaughn? Because here's what I think. I think Deuce Vaughn would bring something really special when you have quarterbacks.
Oh, sure he would.
I mean, with like Patrick Mahomes, and now you got Kelsey, who you can line up anywhere you want. He can play any position almost on the football field, other than maybe running back. But then you add to the mix a Deuce Vaughn. I'm kind of thinking to myself, how do you not feel that this guy could be something special at the NFL level with the Kansas City Chiefs? Now, Deuce Vaughn may not be that good with a lot of teams because that's not who they are. They don't have the quarterbacks that can utilize it. They don't have the offenses that can utilize or specialize in doing certain things with certain players. But the offensive staff at Kansas City and the quarterback at Kansas City can really make something special of Deuce Vaughn. How do you think he fits in it today? Because he's going to get drafted today.
You think he'll go in the top 3 rounds? I'm not sure. I think he fits.
I think he could.
I think he fits for anybody. I think for him, the best place is a place like Kansas City because they will utilize him that way.
You think it's Saturday he gets drafted?
I don't know.
I don't either. I guess I don't.
Seeing what teams just did in the first round at that position, I think enhances the value of Deuce Vaughn and the way that position's being valued. His skill set for being the move-around kind of player is very high. And he can return, by the way. So I think that if you're Deuce Vaughn, Kansas City's perfect. If he falls to him and they got a spot to add that kind of weapon and they don't get the receivers that they like, I'm in.
I am too.
Like, all the way in on that.
Me too.
I mean, you don't match the level of production we saw from him. Darren Sproles, there's so many examples of guys like Deuce Vaughn that can be such weapons for teams, and the Chiefs do have a need, honestly, for that kind of a weapon still. So, yeah, I'd love it. But I think there's about 32 teams that could find use for Deuce Vaughn on the roster. So, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that does elevate him. And what we saw in the first round could amplify that. All right, let's give away our final pair of tickets. This one to Coheed and Cambria. We will do that right now to our first caller, Coheed and Cambria, Friday, May 12th, 7 o'clock, out at the Cotillion. Special guest, Deaf Heaven. We'll give away our final pair of tickets to that right now. First caller, IHOP hotline, 869-1240. We'll come back. We'll talk a little college basketball next on Sports Daily.
We made USAA insurance for veterans like James. When he found out how much USAA was helping members save, he said,
"It's time to switch."
We'll help you find the right coverage at the right price. USAA. What you're made of, we're made for. Restrictions apply.